All right, Amy Keller Laird. We are live and recording. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And just to fill the audience in, I connected with you on an Instagram post that Sarah Sapora did. Sarah's also been on the podcast. If you listening want to listen to that one, she's wonderful. And the post was about this what is it called? American Academy of Pediatrics had decided to give drugs and surgery to children over 12 in regards to obesity prevention. And there was what somebody called a recipe for a shit show in the comment section. And your comment referenced science and data and facts and articles. And I immediately perked up and was like, I want to talk to this lady.
Yeah.
And so I reached out, and here we are.
Here we are.
For those listening that have no idea who Amy Keller Laird is, do you mind giving a brief intro on who you are and what you're about?
Yeah. Well, as we were discussing earlier, Amy Keller Laird was born in Columbia, Missouri, but has been a New Yorker since 1998. But really, what's pertinent to this podcast is I'm the former editor-in-chief of Women's Health. I've been a health journalist for a decade. I have OCD. I write a lot about mental health. I launched my own mental health lifestyle platform called Mental, because we're taking back the word. It's at clubmental.com last October. And I've written a million articles and had recently done a big report called New Year, New Eating Disorder around the New Year, New You messaging that comes out every January. And so when I saw Sarah's post about what was happening in the world of childhood obesity and how it's now like, oh, let's medicate and let's have surgery and do all of these things, I kind of looked at the report I'd done around eating disorders, and it does in fact seem like a shit show what they're advising. I mean, but right, like in layman's terms, in facts, I mean, should I just go here? Like
Please.
It's the majority of data, right? So I am a journalist. I do look at a million clinical studies around everything I do. I want it to be proven, peer reviewed, talk to experts, et cetera, the people who are actually doing the latest research on these types of topics. And when you look at data around people who are, if we are going to use the words overweight and obese, which, different communities don't want to use that, but just for the sake of everyone understanding, when there was a study that basically showed that when people came into the New York City school system and teenagers, and they monitored people's BMI, which first of all, we know is flawed for 80 million reasons, and it's pretty racist, and there's all kinds of things wrong with BMI. So why we're still using BMI as a measurement of people's health, I don't know. But okay, in this study, the researchers came in and looked at people's BMI, and then they told the kids like, oh, you're in this category or you're in this category or whatever. And the year that followed, the people who had been told, oh, you have a high BMI, you're in the obese, you're in the overweight category, had even higher BMIs than the people who actually had high BMIs but weren't told that. So what does this say? This is a little gobbledygook, but what that's saying is, when you identify people and put them into a category and say you have a problem and you need to lose weight and you need to do X, Y, Z, the reverse often happens. It doesn't actually help them. It sort of works as a shaming mechanism. And a lot of data also around the fact of when people say, or try to give unhelpful advice, you need to lose weight, or, oh, you need to do this for your health, or X, Y, Z, or whatever. Or when people make comments like that, it again backfires. It doesn't actually motivate people to lose weight. Instead, it puts them back into their shame spiral. So the fact that a national organization is now suggesting that we really make sure kids know they're overweight and they need to do something about it just sounds really scary to me, and seems like it will not only not help the obesity issue we have in America, but might hurt it. Because the better way to if you actually do need to lose weight, right? Or you want to lose weight, right? Whichever your reasonings are, the better way to do it is with self-compassion. And that might sound woo-woo, but it's actually been proven that like when you treat yourself with self-compassion, and when, if you are going down a weight loss journey and you you're trying to eat a certain way, and then all of a sudden you eat a sleeve of Oreos, and then you're like, oh, self-flagellating and, hating yourself. The chances are you're just going to eat more Oreos. When you go, oh, you know what? I'm human. I had Oreos. It's fine. It's cool to eat Oreos. Like, I'm just a person. Then the next day you probably jump back onto your path. So it's like, I don't know, this idea that we need to just keep reminding people they need to lose weight as if they haven't thought of it before. I mean, I don't know, to go into a rabbit hole here. It's like telling people like, oh, you're anxious, just calm down. It's like, duh, no, duh, I know. Don't tell me that. That's not going to help anyway.
Yeah, it is an interesting conundrum to raise awareness or provide information to individuals thinking, oh, they know more. So now, ergo, they will choose differently. Right. And just as background, I did some of my PhD work around behavior change, and that very simple idea has been disproven for decades. And yet we continue to give pamphlets out, share facts, provide information with the mistaken idea that now, since we know better, we will do better. And it sounds like what you're suggesting is the same thing that is occurring in the health and diet industry at times.
Exactly. It's like uh, uh, we somehow believe that yes, if oh my God, I'm totally bobbling. I hope you're cutting that out.
Oh, you're doing great. Bobble away.
I'm just bobbling. I
Let me
think
let me ask you from your perspective, like, because you were in it, right? Like, you were the editor of Women's Health magazine, and you were shaping magazine covers and content and editorials, and you had a large voice and a say in how a lot of these topics were covered. How did you navigate your like objectivity or your desire to affect change in that space?
yeah, I mean, when I was at Women's Health, right, when I took over Women's Health, I didn't really know what I mean, I'd been working there as the executive editor. I thought, okay, I'll just kind of, oh my God, I got this job. I'm going to keep going along. But over time, I started realizing we can actually affect change. It was around the time Trump was elected, and healthcare and politics were overlapping. And it was like healthcare sits at the intersection of culture, right? And so the idea, at that time, in I wrote these Dear John letters actually to some cover lines that we used a lot. We used to use the phrase bikini body on Women's Health. It was a big seller. This is back when newsstand sales were a thing, and you could track, how people reacted to cover lines and do studies around that, et cetera. And obviously the body positivity movement had started taking off, and which we know had, like, hello, that'd been around since the 70s. It wasn't a new thing that started in the 2000s, but it was like, oh, finally the mass media gets involved and realizes, oh, maybe we shouldn't be talking to people this way, or saying you have to get a bikini body to get in a bikini, et cetera. So we did the survey at Women's Health. It was like, what don't you like about us? And we listed out all these cover lines, all these cover celebs, all these things, just to, verify what I thought I was seeing popping up around, culture. And the top two cover lines people did not like were using the phrase bikini body or drop 2 sizes. And, then when I started thinking about it, well, right. I mean, my God, nobody should be dropping 2 sizes in the span of a monthly magazine. Like, that's not healthy. So I wrote these Dear John letters formatted like Dear Bikini Body. Hi, like, thanks for your service, but goodbye. Like, wouldn't want to be ya. You're basically insulting people, even if that wasn't our intent. And talk to the readers and the public about the fact that, yes, look, if you want to have healthy weight loss, that's cool. If you've decided that for yourself, or you've worked with your doctor and decided that for yourself. But the way we talk about it is going to change. We are not going to use phrases like that have implications that only a certain type of body is a bikini body, or you have to get this, or you have to do this, or in 2 weeks you're all of a sudden gonna like have these flat abs. I mean, these were cover lines. I think, unfortunately, when you were in the magazine business, as it was dying out, and you had to sell on newsstand in order to still have a job, it's sort of like, what do you do? So, but this is where culture was going, and this is the right thing to do, right? We don't need to talk to people about that. You can still come here for healthy weight loss, but you don't have to come here and be shamed. And that actually, it was like an explosion of press. I don't know. I didn't even really think about it at the time. I was just kind of like, this is the thing to do. We saw it in the survey. We're going to not do this anymore, et cetera. And it was like people being like, thank you, women's health, and like all these things. And then I got some snarky responses, like Refinery 29 was like, welcome to the party, women's health. And it was like, okay, well, I did have to sell on newsstand. I'm just going to say that one more time. You're a digital publication. But it was like, this is so interesting. And then like a year later, after talking to some exercise physiologists, et cetera, about why are we even talking about weight as a measure of health versus metabolic markers? Why do we keep focusing so much on weight? Because as you know, and this is not a technical term, but like people can be skinny fat, right? Like you can be walking around and someone's objective view of you is, oh, that person's thin, but like they're not healthy. So like, can we stop with this, like looking at someone who we think is unhealthy because of their weight? They could be metabolically healthy. And so then we started, adding in real women instead of fitness models into our workouts, et cetera, and started doing these things. So that's where I sort of, really kind of got interested in the science and the data behind the way people have desires to change, and then the things that other people do to try to nudge them into changing that aren't actually effective.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you banned the use of the term bikini body from your magazine.
That is what we did. Yes.
And that means you're not seeing it on the cover or even just articles.
Yeah, we didn't use it anywhere. I mean, I'm no longer the editor of Women's Health, but
Sure.
yes, I don't think they
Yeah.
reverted. But
Yeah, it would
yeah,
be
it
awkward
was
if they did.
it was an often used phrase. Like we had this wall of like all the former covers, right? You would see how covers were next to each other, and you had sales data around covers, et cetera. And it was a regularly used phrase since the inception of the magazine. And so there was
So
some,
then just to interject there, are you suggesting that the use of the word bikini body was a really helpful tactic to move magazines and to sell copies? And
yes.
that is because people are being shamed into buying the magazine? Or how do you explain that?
I don't know if people would actually, I mean, I guess there's different segments. I'm not a scientist. Like this
Right,
may be
right.
a question for you, but I mean, I'm sure there's different segments of people who do like to be like, oh, okay, I want to lose 5 pounds before summer. And then people who all their lives have been shamed about their weight. And then they
Right.
see bikini body and they're like, can we stop this? So look, there's different factions of people. There's
Yeah.
also like what people say they want, what people don't say they want. There used to be a whole thing where people would tell the editors of Cosmo, why don't you put real people on the cover or whatever? And then you put a real person and it tanks. So
I guess it goes back to that New Year, New You, New Year's Eve resolution slash mantra, which for some people is hugely inspiring, loving, encouraging, etc. But there are certainly vast numbers of people that would have shame-based undertones, judgment, etc. And so perhaps overall, it is better to just not go to that place in the same way.
right.
Overall, it's better not to use bikini body.
Yeah, I mean,
That makes
look,
sense.
there are things that might work and might sell, but aren't the right things to do culturally. So,
Mm.
and or just like once you see the studies that like this is how that makes another segment of society, a large segment of society feel, isn't the right thing to do. And there are other ways to talk about, if you want to get more in shape for summer or whatever it be, without using that phrase, right? It's like, hi, we could be a little more creative, aren't we, editors here? So
So I do remember the pushback, something like, if you have a body, you have a bikini body.
exactly,
Right.
that's what it is, right? It's like,
Okay.
I don't think, and I mean, I don't, that when the phrase first came around, I don't think people were like, I'm going to use this to shame everybody, right? It's like, at first, right? If you look back, okay, here's a little magazine history. If you look back at like when this legendary editor, RIP Helen Gurley Brown, took over Cosmo, okay, Cosmo, it became this magazine where any kind of bodily agency for women was kind of like a feminist thing, right? So deciding how you want to handle your body and do this thing could have, I mean, I'm making up theories here, like I didn't do a paper on this, it back in the day been like, oh, this is a way for like women can do whatever they want, right? At Cosmo it was like, you can talk about sex, you can do this, you can do what you want with your body, you can do, it's not just about women don't have any power. So, but then eventually I think that phrase started just getting like bikini body or new year, new you specifically became so ingrained with weight loss versus new year, new you theoretically could mean anything, right? It could be, oh, I'm going to have a new attitude to this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be nicer. I'm going to blah, blah. Like when you look at the history of New Year's resolutions, people's resolutions used to be like, I'm going to be nicer and I'm going to help communities. And now it's like top 3, lose weight, exercise more, eat better. So they're all kind of tied up around weight loss. So I think as that phrase just like new you took on like new body, and it's kind of like, well, I can't have a new body. And
Yeah, and just to add to that, it sounds like the new you mantra there implies also that current body equals bad. Current body
exactly.
equals not
Why do I need a
great.
new body, right? I don't, right.
Yeah.
I think it is really all about the implications there. And the bizarre thing, once I started doing this big report on this, is like, the NIH has a page that uses the phrase "New Year, New You." The Cleveland Clinic uses the phrase "New Year, New You." It's everywhere. It's like permeated. Like it's on Walmart has a whole section of New Year, New You products. It's like it has like permeated society. It's interesting though. This year there were a few instances. I think, oh God, I don't know. It was like Land's End or some brand like that. Was like, new year, new you, please. It's like that they're just trying to sell you a gym membership. I mean, which, okay, well, that's how it starts getting used. So I think it's like starting to peel back around, but like talking to women for that story who had a history of disordered eating, it is particularly triggering because they would say those are the phrases that I would see every year. And even if they were in recovery for their eating disorders, that kind of that they still get triggered into the eating disorder thinking of like, oh, well, I do want that. It's like talking to one woman who was like, I know it's not healthy when I had an eating disorder, but I still want it. And so when those messages then are pervasive around them, it's really hard to not feel like, it's really hard to not slip back into that pattern.
Yeah, I was shocked by some of the statistics cited in that report that you did about new year, new you. Like I wrote down too, 20% of people with anorexia die by suicide, which I thought was just astounding. And then 65% of dieters return to their pre-diet weight within 3 years. 65%.
Yeah,
So
I think some of what people don't realize is that, sorry, I have my son chatting in the background if we're hearing people
no, you're
walking.
good.
Um, uh, People don't realize how deadly eating disorders can be, particularly among mental health conditions. Either people die physiologically because they don't have enough nutrients, or they die by suicide. And it's because, in part, they just can't stop their thought process and wanting to do that. And it's a draining experience. And so when we're like selling like journals using New Year, New You, maybe we shouldn't do that because people are dying from these kinds of messages. And the one that's the other one you cited that like, or you didn't cite, but 20% of people who are admitted into an eating disorder facility attribute the onset of their eating disorder to messaging like that. They're basically saying 20% of the people who are going to an eating disorder treatment facility say pro-dieting, anti-obesity messaging is what triggered my eating disorder. And that's a shocking stat to me. That was the stat that I was like, oh my God. And then also the high percentage of people who say that dieting eventually turns into disordered eating. And that's not to say that people can't diet. I don't want to get into that messaging, because if you want to lose weight, you shouldn't be shamed on the other spectrum. Like whatever your reason is, it's up to you. You do you. But it's the way in which it gets talked about, and that it gets conflated with, like you said, the old you is bad.
So 20% of people admitted to an eating disorder facility suggest that dieting messages started their eating disorder.
Yes.
Damn.
I mean, and that's a clinical study.
Yeah.
Of course, that's people's perceptions. We can't prove that with machine, but I think it's pretty powerful that this kind of messaging, we got to change this. I mean, look, we know for a fact that just telling people there's an obesity epidemic in this country doesn't do anything. It just backfires. So why do we keep doing it? It's not working. I think it's more like, again, it's like going down this more road of like self-compassion and talking about like improving your health. And I just find it's, I also like, there's some magazine called like Slimming World or something like that, it's just like still out there, like surviving. And like, it's just the same old messages.
Do you see do you see those messages shifting, or do you see the culture moving in a positive trajectory?
Yeah. I mean, actually there was one study, cited around New Year's resolutions. It was a Forbes health poll where improving my mental health was the top New Year's goal. So it's interesting, depending on who you look at Statista's polls, it's about losing weight. You look over here at Forbes Health, maybe it's the people who are answering the polls, right? Because people who are answering a Forbes Health poll are, maybe a different subset of human being. But yes, so People magazine, for one, got rid of the name of their they used to do an annual issue called Half Their Sons.
Oh, I remember that as a kid,
Yeah.
like reading my mom's People magazine, and it had
Yeah,
a
and it'd be
before and
like the
after
person
kind of.
holding out like their pants and whatever. So
Yeah.
the new editor-in-chief, who I know from the magazine industry, Wendy Noggle, did away with that this year. And they are talking about, I think, what they call meaningful wins or something like that. And one of the women they profiled is a woman who is not slim by standards, but is like one of the strongest women in the world. And she actually did lose weight, but she's still at a higher weight. So I think that's another thing. We can talk about a weight loss journey where you're not just going down to size 2. A weight loss journey can be someone, for example, Sarah Sapora talks about this a lot. She's on a weight loss journey, from here to here, versus somebody else might start here and go down to here. And so I think when we talk about weight loss journeys, that's another thing that can be done, where you show people at all spectrums, at all, different weight points across the spectrum, because your healthy might be, 282 while someone else's is 165. It's like that's like a big point. So anyway, the People thing occurred, I think, which was really interesting. Just trolling around the internet. I saw InStyle doing a story around, like, let's not talk about diets, let's talk about therapy. And so it's interesting that it's kind of shifted around to mental health. And magazines, I think, to be fair, most of the women's magazines do not use this phrase anymore. It was really popular in the 2000s and then I think it trickled out of that. And I also, just to say, women's magazines did a lot of like legit and amazing health reporting too. They get vilified for a lot of things, but And then there's also like, so you could say, look at TikTok hashtags like New Year, New You, New Year, New Me. It's like they're in the billions. But there's also the hashtag New Year, Same Me. So
Oh,
it's like
interesting.
the balance, the balance is occurring. Now, there was also a really scary report that came out of the Wall Street Journal around this, a bunch showing just how prevalent there were TikTok videos of people talking about eating at 300 calories. And I have this whole thing where I want to do this story where I'm like, you can't, so I'm going down a rabbit hole here. You can't use the word depression or anorexia or psychiatric or whatever without your TikTok video being like dinged. You have to put like depression with one of the S's as like, you know, a number sign, or like or else it gets like dinged as like, this isn't appropriate. But we have like people talking about 300-calorie diets. We have 60-year-old men talking about their 15-year-old girlfriends. Why is it the algorithm is dinging mental health information, but like not dinging like these like lecherous men? It's like I'm on a rant about it because I also, for my site Mental, I have a Pinterest account where I have 3 followers. I don't know why I can't get any followers on Pinterest, so feel free to follow me. But I had someone reach out to me from Pinterest and be like, oh, hey, we see you're like, doing some advertising on here, etc. We want to help you, whatever. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, what about XYZ? And then they wrote back and they're like, oh, wait, we saw what kind of content you're doing. We can't, sorry, that violates, we can't help, we can't offer you services. And I was like, we want Pinterest to be a positive place. I'm like, but what I'm offering are mental health solutions and information around educational information, as well as reasons for people to not feel shame for having a mental health condition or feel free to talk about it. And they were just like, I'm sorry, I understand, but this violates our policies. I'm like, what? So I don't know. I went into a tangent. Anyway,
I love
peeps
tangents.
be talking about 300-calorie diets that are just like killing people, but we can't talk about depression without like morphing the word so the algorithm can't read it. Anyway.
It's such a surreal world, isn't it? Because I hear that and I think, oh, that's like a power bar. That's not sustainable in the long term. And then I think back to that study that I referenced earlier, which is 65% of dieters return to their pre-diet weight within 3 years. And it's like, it doesn't seem like a practical, long-term, viable, pragmatic solution to even consider that kind of a setup. It's like, what are you just going to eat celery forever? You're not a rabbit.
Well, you can't. I mean, and that's why the most restrictive diets fail. And for full disclosure, I spent a year as the head of content and creative at Weight Watchers, where we don't talk about I don't work there anymore. I am not like anti or pro weight loss. It's like how do you talk about it? The interesting thing about that company is the chief medical officer is actually a behavioral psychologist, and what he does preach is self-compassion, because the only way, if you want to lose weight, to sustain it, is to have self-compassion toward yourself on the journey, and to not be overly restrictive or say, I can't eat that whole category, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. I'm actually writing this story right now about blood glucose for another publication, Airmail, which is the new publication from the former editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair. And I've been talking to a lot of nutritionists along this journey of people who want to eat by blood glucose levels. They want to try to smooth out their blood glucose and not have it spike. And everyone I speak to says the thing that we all know. Anytime you cut out a whole category or you say that's off limits, like the human brain is like, I want it, right? So like, give me. So, right, it's like this woman I just talked to was like, if you want the Oreo, have the Oreo, just eat some peanut butter with it. Because then it's like, there are more realistic things. And I don't even want to say that, because if you want to eat the Oreos, just eat the Oreos. Like, I believe that. But like, if you do want to lose weight, like I know we're all over the place. We're like eating disorders, losing weight, etc. But like, if you do want to lose weight, but you're like, I love an Oreo, fine. eat a little bit of like protein with it, and then you negate part of the problem. So I think I do think, and I mean, I could be slammed for saying this, but I do think some of the diet companies are actually propagating a behavioral health methodology, but it's really hard to do that when you've been a company that's been around, as any of these companies have, for 50 years, and you maybe in the past did contribute to diet culture.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about your role at Weight Watchers? I'm
Yeah.
intrigued.
Are you like, oh my God, what
No,
what is this now?
no, I'm
Um,
intrigued by that because from my perspective, and admittedly, I don't really know anything about dieting. I've never been on a diet. I'm just like a skinny dude that always works out and has ridiculous genes. And my perception of Weight Watchers is like my grandma was on it, and
mhm.
every time I spoke to her, she was really stressed about the points of the meals and
Well,
weighing herself and pound by pound. And it always seemed like in this N of one, admittedly, that she was stressed, anxious, not very compassionate with herself, and really
yes.
wasn't having a great time.
So it is, and I can only, say so much, but it is admittedly, I think, a different company now than it was then. When, if you look back, and even when I worked there, we did a post, we had this series of like then now, where you would see old Weight Watchers like memos that were like, if it's spreadable, it's inedible. And then it'd be like, today we're launching peanut butter. We got Weight Watchers peanut butter. So like a lot, like literally, if you look back in old Weight Watchers magazines, and this is not a secret, like we posted that on Weight Watchers social media, it'd be like, no waffles. And then it's like, flash forward to 2022, we sell waffle makers, So, and in 2022 and now 2023, the head of like science for the company is a behavioral health psychologist. And there are amazing people who work there who are behavioral health psychologists, a lot of nutritionists, lots of studies that they would do with Yale, et cetera. They do a lot around non-shaming, like actual clinical studies they do with universities, et cetera, around that. So I'm not here to be like, yay, Weight Watchers. But more that there's actually a lot in the program. I think the most fascinating thing I found about when I worked there, and I was the head of content and creative, so I wasn't deciding in any of the science or any of these things. We powered the marketing assets, the social media, the stories, talked to the members, et cetera. We ran the photo shoots, and Weight Watchers actually uses all members in their ads. They're not stock images from Getty. So I was running these photo shoots, and we would have members from different areas of the country come in. And by the end of every shoot, these people were best friends, best friends. I've never seen anything like it. And I've done a lot of real people stories in my days. Well, I worked at Redbook, I worked at Allure, I worked at Good Housekeeping. I've never seen, there's something about, and these are people who loved being on the program. There's something about their shared journey and people sharing. One of these girls, her name was Claire. She like does like Claire's cocktails, and it'd be all these cocktails she still drinks, but there's certain points. So the point system does still exist.
Cool. I think it
Yeah.
is a good point, though, that you're raising here, which is there's a lot of good going on in the industry. And
If it works for you, I think that's what it is. If it works for you, you can actually find a lot of community there. They have virtual workshops. They now, I don't know why I'm like an ad for WW right now, but like
yeah,
they have identity workshops, people in the LGBTQ community who are in the weight loss, like Latina moms, this and that, the Black women's workshop. And these people are like forming real friendships. So in contrast to the old days where you'd show up at this meeting hall in the bottom of a church and it's like, you know, everybody's 70 and older, you could find your peeps now if you want, right? So, but like, again, there's a subset of people whose moms or grandmas, in your case, grew up on Weight Watchers, and it created, in certain ways, diet culture for them.
yeah.
So,
And then this is a softball slash, thought experiment, but how do we shift this diet culture? I mean, it seems like this is a very ingrained, lots of momentum, a lot of history,
it's so great.
societal issue. that is slowly being chipped away in various parts and pieces. But are you optimistic about where things are going? Like, are we totally missing something
Well,
significant here?
here's the sad thing. Okay. So I was like kind of alarmed to see that eating disorders are on the rise because I was like, well, the proliferation of body positivity in the mainstream media over the past decade, could that, but no, like while body positivity was rising and then sort of got to some people co-opted by like skinny white girls, you know, eating. So I was like, maybe, right, with like people being more like we're showing different versions of beauty. People are on the covers of magazines or being seen as, sex symbols of all different sizes and abilities, et cetera, et cetera. Like this has to be shifting culture. And I think in a way it is, but then you see the eating disorders are going up. So you're like, okay, well, I do think COVID had a lot to do with the rise in eating disorders in the past few years because it's you in your house alone, right? And eating disorder treatment really relies on you getting out of your own self and head and being with your therapist and other people, et cetera. But what I do think is good is that we are magazines, and I keep saying magazine, but I mean editorial brands, et cetera, are showcasing Tess Holliday's this beautiful plus size model. She was on the cover of Self, right? We've got a woman actually who was an intern at Allure who has like a neurodegenerative disease, I believe, and is in a wheelchair, is on the L Word, and she's like sexy as fuck, like she's so, like, and she like this didn't happen 30 years ago. So like there's strides, right? There are strides of like people of different abilities, different sizes, different skin tones, et cetera, hopefully being seen as like beauty can look different. And you may know this from your expertise, but like talking to psychologists, it's like when we put in front of people different images of beauty or different, what can be beautiful, expand their repertoire of what can be beautiful, and it's not just one thing, one size, one look, one this, their mind does start to change. And I think that's true of myself. I have curated my own social feeds around multiple people and sizes and this and that, and I'm more harsh on the way I look than I see someone else's body and I say that's beautiful, like in all of its, whatever it is. um
Yeah,
I don't know.
I remember reading some studies in terms of messaging, and they were basically affirming or finding that the more that the messenger looks like you, the more relatable they are, the more impactful the message, the more lasting the change. And so I think it's inevitable that seeing a diversity of bodies, colors, genders, etc., will have a more pronounced impact on individuals that need to see
Yeah.
those people that are like, oh, they're like me. They did it. I can do it too. In
Yep.
the same way that I remember when Obama won the presidency, a lot of Black people were extremely excited about that possibility. And you were seeing Black children realizing that the sky's the limit, that they can be president too. And he looks like me, so I can do that too. And it sounds similar to what you're describing here.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that classic photo of the young boy rubbing Obama's head and being like, "You have hair like me," and
Yeah.
it kind of makes you want to cry because it's like, oh my God, the power. I
And
mean,
so
there was
seeing people in wheelchairs and seeing people that are
exactly.
plus size but also healthy and active, etc., not being vilified or cast aside in the shadows, but being brought out front and put on magazine covers and the front page of papers.
Exactly. And I think the interesting thing, and this is like, so there's a model. Oh my God, why am I blanking on her name? Ashley. Oh my God. I can't
Please
believe that.
don't please don't look at me for any support with naming models. I
Okay.
am useless. I'm sorry.
Well, she is
She
plus
sounds
size.
great.
She's beautiful. Yeah, she's wonderful. I'll think of it after this. I tried to get her on the cover of Women's Health many times. I got turned down.
Oh.
She
Why would somebody turn you down for being on a magazine cover?
They want to be in a fashion magazine.
Oh, not a health magazine.
Yeah.
And so the idea would be, sorry, this is a tangent, but
This is a total tangent, but I can talk
the,
about this forever because
but so the health magazine would be like bad for the brand, or that would hinder the possibility that they would be seen as fashionable?
there's a certain cachet to like being on the cover of Vogue or Harper's Bazaar or Elle or etc. And I think that has shifted now that health has become the new health is like the new cool, you know, but if you're on the I don't know the exact, you know, psychology behind it, but it was a very common thing where like I got Reese Witherspoon on the cover of Women's Health, and that was the first time in a decade she'd appeared on any non-fashion magazine. And so I was like actively working. We had Gwyneth Paltrow on the cover, etc. But right, I mean, I like there were people who turned us down multiple times because they would only appear on fashion covers because it kind of puts you in a different like I'm cool category.
So interesting.
Yeah.
In my
Oh,
brain, I'm like, hey,
the
why
whole
would
cover
you?
celeb negotiations is like a whole world of itself. I mean, my God. Whew.
Yeah, I can't
That's a
imagine.
stressful thing where you're like, okay, I want to have so and so on the cover, but I want to do this, but if I can't get her, then I get to yeah.
It's such
I
a
forgot.
weird job. Do you ever sit back when you were doing it and being like, this is just such a weird job? Like I get to decide
Yes.
who millions of people see when they're standing in line at the grocery store on the cover,
You,
and
you like the coolest
whose
thing
butt I
ever was
get to
when
show
I'd
in it.
like, yeah, be on the subway and I'd see someone reading it and you'd be like, I have an editor's page in there. Yeah, you feel like you have impact. I mean, and I guess you do to a certain extent.
Mm.
But while you're doing it, you're kind of just like, oh, it's my job. I do this. I need this person. I have to make. I mean, my whole thing was calculated risk taking. That's why I was like, I'm going to get rid of bikini body. I'm going to write about mental health, and I'm going to talk about myself as the editor in chief of Women's Health having OCD. And that might not seem like a big deal now, but in 2016, when it happened, it was. People weren't being like, I have OCD and I run a global brand. Um,
How did
um,
that go? Do you mind
it
talking
went
about
really well.
OCD?
Oh, I talk about it all the time. I write, you can, if you
Not
Google
with
me,
me.
oh yeah. I wrote a piece for Well and Good later on called Is It Blood? Is that blood? Because that's my saying. I'm like, have contamination OCD. I think everything's blood. I think everything with red pen, which was a hazard back in my beauty editor days. I used to be a beauty editor. I was the beauty director of Allure. So I know now you're like, wait, beauty, weight loss, eating disorders, what this woman is bizarre. I am well-rounded. I used to deal with a lot of red makeup back in the day. Like red lipsticks would come in red nail polish, and then it'd be like the red nail polish would spill as it always does, and it gets on. And then I'd be like, "Is that blood, guys?" And they'd be like, "It's polish," and I'd be like, so I can laugh about it, but yeah, I was never like I never like hid my OCD. Anyone who's worked with me knows all these things. Like I have my own pens. Don't touch my pens. We used to have to write on hard copy paper, right? It would pass around the magazine from editor to editor, and I'd be like, okay, don't come in my office to try to take my pen. I got the community pen jar. Please use that. But when I was at Women's Health, and one of my editors, this is like 2015, 2016, the stats were starting to come out around all the rise of anxiety amongst women. Let's do a story, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I can't with just a bunch of more stats. Oh, this many people have anxiety. It's like it's terrible. I forgot about it 5 seconds later. And so I was like, what if I'm running this brand and I have OCD and it's a health brand. And then we get all these other people and everything we went on staff who wants to talk about it. So our legal department shut us down from anyone on staff talking about it because they were like, then they could sue us. What if we later fire them? And then they could say it was because, so this is the whole conundrum. But I had already disclosed, so I they couldn't stop me. But what we did was we found like 13 other women of all professions, you know, doctors, writers, this, that, artists, with various conditions, depression, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, postpartum, et cetera. And we photographed all of them. And on the front, it was this, I mean, this is where the power of print comes out. On the front, it was like just this collage of women. Which of these women has mental illness? flip, all of them, including me. I'm the editor of Women's Health. I have OCD, blah, blah, blah. And we partnered with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, which is a pretty well-known mental health organization, a very well-known, I mean, it's probably, on like a poll about women and mental health. And so we got them involved. We got the Jed Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, et cetera. We did this whole thing, this hashtag campaign back in the day when that was popular. Who, not what, right? I went on the Today Show. I was talking to Willie Geist about my OCD. I'm like, maybe no one's going to hire me from here, Willie. And he's like, you're doing fine. You're doing fine.
Yeah, you're on the Today Show. I think you have some options in the future.
So that's kind of when I started like being like, oh, this, right, like we can have an impact here. And that story, that was sort of like, there's a TikTok trend, which is no longer trending, but like 6 months ago, this TikTok trend that was like, using this sound that's like, this is going to be my personality for the rest of my life. And I'm like, I kind of became like the accidental OCD poster child. I was like,
Yeah.
well, I didn't really know where this was going, but it was like at that point where I was like, after I didn't work at Women's Health anymore, it was like, okay, where are all where's the magazine? Where for mental health, but people who also like beauty and fashion and lifestyle and this and that. It was like, you can get like serious mental health coverage, right? Or you can go to like the Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic and you get lists of symptoms in this. And you can go to some mental health sites. And at the time it was like black and white photos and like tears and the hand on the window and running in the rain and fetal positions. Or you can get like women's magazines, which at the time it was like mental health was mostly hidden under mindfulness or wellness, or it was kind of sanitized, et cetera. Everybody's writing about it a lot more now. It's, the pandemic blew this open. But when I started thinking about it 4 years ago, like to now, 2022, or when I launched my site clubmental.com, there was no site that like brings them together, right? Like the fact that like you can talk and you can cuss and you can be funny and you can be this, but you can also have depression. You can, have a big job and you have to look this and you put on lipstick, but like then you go home and you cry in your bed, or you have to deal with this, or you go to therapy, or you take meds, and let's talk about it. And let's use photos that make people not want to like cry even more when they're there, right? Like, where is that? So that's why I launched this brand. And the way I think the most compelling way to explain it is like, I believe that we can use, and because I come from this background of being a beauty editor, we can use everyday lifestyle and beauty objects as mental health management tools. And I don't mean we're going to light lavender candles and all be cured of our depression. We know that isn't happening. And we know that like wearing a gratitude sweatshirt is not doing anything. But there are studies. So I like launched these like best of mental health awards around products that are based on experts. We interviewed 17 experts. We looked at like 60 plus clinical studies. And the one that strikes me as to explain this the best is there was a study that found that blue light blocking glasses can actually reduce mania symptoms in people with bipolar. And it's like, well, hello, like that is a side effect free tool, not to cure bipolar, not to replace medicine or medication or therapy or whatever you need to do, but it's like those kind of things. Or I also had a category that was like, when you are so depressed, you can't shower. These are the best products vetted by dermatologists, dentists, et cetera, to deal with skin, tooth, hair issues, right? Like you can't brush your teeth. Okay, this is the mouthwash that contains the ingredient that will keep your mouth the most free of bacteria until you were able to do that again. So I think like what my goal is to be like, let's talk about these things. They're normal. It's normal to say, people 4 years ago wouldn't be like, I haven't showered in 4 days, but like, I'll tell you, there go times where like, I am kind of depressive and like that happens. And it is like, okay, well, how do I handle my hygiene when that happens? Right. Anyway,
it's good. And it sounds like what you're alluding to there with the OCD and the mental health stuff is at a foundation the same as the eating disorder, obesity stuff, which is be graceful, be gentle, love yourself where you're at, and do the best you can with the aspect of like shame minimization, comparison, judgment minimization, and just it's okay.
It's okay. And I think the other thing is to also realize we don't also have to like while we should have self-compassion, we don't have to also like love ourselves every second. Like there were also studies we did at Women's Health. We did this big survey on body global survey because we had a ton of international editions. And it was like, people don't want to be told, love yourself every second. Like, I don't have to love my elbow to be like an okay human. Like, I can accept myself. I can be body neutral. I can be body accepting. I can not like parts of my body, and that's okay too. Like, people were getting basically shamed for not like having body love at all times. So it's just like, can we just all be normal? Like, I don't like, why is everyone always just like pushing their shit on other people? I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm doing my best to normalize abnormality and make kindness cool. And
I love
I'm grateful for you stopping by the podcast and chatting about all this stuff with me. And I wanted to highlight your website is clubmental.com. Is that where
yeah.
you want to drive people to find you? I know you're on
Yeah,
Instagram. I can
clubmental.com.
okay.
You can Instagram, we've got a club_mental, but everywhere else, if you want to see me doing some weird TikToks, just Club Mental TikTok.
Club Mental.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
Thanks for chatting.